Weirdest dating situation ever. Story 1. This sweet boy, maybe 21, 22, came over to my house for a quick meet and maybe a hand job if I was feeling saucy. We started making out in the kitchen, me sitting on the island, him against me, standing. He orgasmed while we were kissing. I felt bad for him but brushed it off. He left, and I never heard from him again. Mason, if you're out there, it's all good. It happens. I hope you're well. Story 2. I don't have a Tinder story. I've been married too long. I do enjoy this forum, though. Here's my story anyway. My uncle, 19, had me, 15, go on a blind date with his GF, 19, and her sister, 17. When we get to the door, he turns to me, looks me in the face and says, "I forgot to tell you she has Down syndrome." Being a gentleman, I took care of her and treated her like princess all night. Everyone saw me holding hands and walking with her through the fair. I was made fun of for a long time. I had very little knowledge of what Down syndrome was back then. Honestly, I'm glad I treated her the way I did. I think if I ran away like I wanted to, I would probably regret it now. Anyways, I've only dated 6 people since 1996, and that was the weirdest situation I've been in. Story 3. I was dating someone, and on the 4th date we went back to his house. We went to his room to take it from there. He immediately cannonballs his bed. This guy was also quite large and overweight. The bed broke, of course. I just stood there, flabbergasted. I may need to mention his age to add more context as to why this was even more bizarre. He's 46 years old. I told him I wasn't feeling well and left. Story 4. He just showed up, got his rocks off, and took off? I'd say this whole setup is part of a fetish for him. Pretty selfish of him, though, not to actually include you. But again, sounds like part of a fetish for him. Well, at least you have a funny story to tell now. Story 5. I ended up in the back of some dude's car, parked at a beach in the pouring rain. He's jerking his limp and I'm sucking his titties because apparently he was into that. Then he gave up and cried because his antidepressants didn't let him get hard anymore. So, that was fun. Story 6. Matched with a guy, but we couldn't meet for coffee or anything before he had to leave to visit some family across the country. We were talking and flirting. It was all very cute and I was excited to meet him. I asked if he wanted to video chat since we couldn't meet in person for a week or so. I mean, you can guess what happened. But at the time, I was completely shocked to open the video chat to him naked, with his already in hand. Story 7. My one and only Tinder meet was, after I met her outside, I opened my front door and let her in first. When I shut the door, she pulled her dress over her head and yeeted it somewhere. She asked, "Do I look okay?" I was wearing overalls with a green t-shirt underneath and a beanie up top. So basically, drunk Luigi couldn't go 0-60 in 5 seconds. Story 8. Not mine, but my friend's, some months ago. She was talking to a guy for some days. Went to 4 dates? No. My friend says that the next date is movie at her home, looking for some action. Next date, they watch the full movie with this guy staring at the screen with wide open eyes. No physical contact at all. My friend is pissed, and when the film ends, tells the guy to go, and he refuses and says he wants to see another movie. My friend says no, and he insists and says he is not going anywhere. He just wants to see another movie. She went to the bathroom and locked herself to call the police. He tried to lure her out saying sorry and telling her that he would leave. When the police arrived, the guy had all the knives of the house spread from smaller to bigger on the big table, and some towels or something like that. Maybe weird is not the exact word XD. Story 9. There was a girl I met on Bumble years ago who invited me over and seemed really enthusiastic. When I got to her place, something felt off not long into it. We went up to her room and started making out. Went down on her, and it was as dry as the Sahara. Never seen that in my life, but I'd heard of girls on antidepressants not getting wet. After going to town for a bit, it got a bit better, so I decided to just go for 4th base, and she stopped me. Then she tells me to frown, and I'm like, okay. She told me that's so much hotter, you smile too much. I was absolutely flabbergasted. Never heard that. Got the ick and the night went nowhere. Talked to my girlmates after and they said I do look hotter when I frown. Kinda annoying cause my disposition is that of a golden retriever. TLDR. Didn't have because I didn't want to frown. Story 10. I had a female come over for drinks. Had drinks? She passed out on my couch, which was good BC I wasn't feeling her. I woke up to find an empty wrapper on my living room table. I thought maybe she woke up hungry and had one of my protein bars. Nope. She took a bite out of my fire starter log. Then she had the nerve to deny it when I called her out on it. It even had teeth imprints in it. Lol. Story 11 matched with this girl on Field about 6 weeks ago. Thursday night. Conversation went so quick I actually kind of thought it was a scam until she started asking when I could pick her up. After the logistics were settled, I drove 20 minutes to pick her up on a corner near where she lived and drove back to my place. We talked on the way and it was a bit awkward, but whatever. Get to my place, we chat a bit on the couch and we start going at it, or more precisely, I start going at it, as she wouldn't stop squirming and trying to get away. This concerned me, so I stopped multiple times and asked if everything was okay and if she wanted to continue to, which she said yes every time, so I kept going. At some point, she grabs my arm, squeezes it, and bites me, like hard enough to leave a bruise. At this point, I'm almost completely turned off, so I put her on top, and maybe 5 seconds after she gets off and says she's done, and that I'm not her type, but she wants to cuddle. As we cuddle, she tells me she likes when a guy completely overpowers her and just uses her for his own pleasure without regard for her. And since I wasn't doing that, it wasn't putting her in the zone. Anyway, I drove her home after, and we never spoke again. Had a bruise on my arm for 4 days afterwards. Story 12. Had this girl come over to my place for our first date. We were sitting on the couch and she asked me what my other piercing was, as I claimed I had two. She saw my nose ring, and so I showed her my nipple piercing. Her, "Wow, that's cool. I have some too." Lifts shirt. Me, "Wow, those are nice." Her, "They taste even better." They did in fact taste like house keys, so we proceeded to date for 18 months. Story 13. I was talking to this guy for a few days. We hit it off really well, and I wanted to meet him in person. I was really young and stupidly agreed to the first meetup being at his house. I get there, and it's a super nice neighborhood, and I was thinking, wow, big houses, this is lovely. I wonder how he affords all this. I knock on the door and his mom answered and called down to him. He was in the basement. This guy knew I was on my way. Well, anyway, I was living with my family at the time too, so I tried to move past it. He takes me down to his room. We smoke weed, and I was like, so are we going to watch a movie or something? Like we talked about. His room had no TV. He was like, no, let's just lay here and talk for a bit, and proceeds to take my shoes off for me. I was super high, so I was like, man, is this weird or am I just high? We lay down and talk a little, and he starts to talk about how cute my feet are and asks if I want to take my socks off. I was like, nah, I'm okay. He then goes down to the end of the bed and starts rubbing them and stuff. I saw where this was headed, so I pretended to get a text from a friend and got out of there. His mom said bye to me on the way out. She was really nice. Not really that bad of a story. It was just way too much for me for a first-time meeting, but I probably should have met him at a public place. Edit. Also, being into feet is whatever. I just wish I was more prepared for that situation. Story 14. I went to a chick's house a long time ago. The red flags were off the charts. I pull up and it's a trailer park. Okay, no problem, I get there and we start making out. She's trying to gag me with her tongue. I hate French kissing. I try to take her bra off and she doesn't want me to okay. She then proceeds to tell me that she had recently broke up with her boyfriend and he might be driving around. Then she also tells me they had been doing meth. I can tell she's not into it and she tells me to leave. I noped the out of there. Then she has the nerve to text me as soon as I get back home. Come back. Mind you, it was 3:30 a.m. Lumfow. I had to block her because she kept calling over and over. Lesson learned. Story 15. Super nice and normal guy I had been on a few dates with. He offered to drive us both to his place after we got drinks one night. We get out to the car, and it's a black Charger airbrushed with very detailed and artistic scenes from the Batman movies. Even his license plate was The Bat. We get to his house and everything is Batman-themed. He had rugs, a shower curtain, figurines, blankets, etc. I finally drew the line when we got into his bedroom and there was a bat signal light projected onto the ceiling. Story 16. I have so many weird Tinder stories. My top 3 are: 1. I hooked up with a guy who was way more religious than he let on. He was cute, and we started hooking up very soon after meeting. After we had the first time, he got a call that his grandpa died, and in his weird religious mindset, God was punishing him and killed his grandpa because of us hooking up. He got super weird, super fast. I am very atheist and thought this was pure insanity. 2. I am a white woman who is only attracted to people of color. IDK why this is the case, but it's relevant to the story. I started seeing a black man who was a little younger than me. He was fixated on knowing how many black men I've slept with and specific details like average penis size. It was weird, but I thought maybe he was insecure. During when wanted me to humiliate him and tell him he had the smallest penis I've ever seen. It was literally just an average dong, and call him the N-word. Absolutely not. I understand that humiliation kink is real, but I was not given a heads up and wasn't given an opportunity to draw a hard line 3. I dated a man who would get horny every single time that I cried. I would get super upset about something and he would interrupt my sad story with a raging bone. I later learned that this is dacrophilia, so I guess it's cool that it's a real fetish. What's not cool is that he would make me cry on purpose and that he openly masturbated while breaking up with me. Story 17. Got pulled over on the first date. Was sitting in the passenger seat of the cop car when he ran her ID. I told him I was on a blind first date and asked if she had a record. She didn't. We now have 2 boys. Story 18. I met a guy at a beach bar once. He was pretty cute, albeit my standards were a lot more inclusive when I was younger. Anyways, he suggested we go for a swim and we did in our clothes. After he suggested that we got back to his car because he had towels in there. We started making out and I realized that I heard snoring in the front seat. He had his friend passed out in the passenger seat. I also had with him in the car after that. Oh, to be 19 again. Story 19. Back in my uni days, I went to a nightclub Friday night. Started talking to a girl, she was funny, hot, and we shared interests. Talked and flirted for hours before going back to her place. Made out in the elevator up to her apartment. Clothes started falling off as soon as we got inside. We made our way to her bedroom. Then I was shocked. She had huge gold-framed picture of Adolf Hitler on her bedroom wall. Shock and disbelief turned to laughter as I thought I was being pranked or something. She was standing there in just her panties and started yelling at me for daring to laugh at the Führer. I picked up my clothes, left her place, and laughed as I walked home in the middle of the night. Wondering what did I just walk into? Remember, boys, never put urine crazy, or neo-Nazis. Story 20. Met this guy who was building tiny houses. He originally suggested we go for a bike ride, but at the last minute he couldn't get his bike unlocked. So I ended up in a half-built tiny house he was living in, parked next to a workshop industrial space. He said he was going to a concert and would drive me home first, but he had to shower before we left. The tiny house didn't have a finished bathroom, so we had to go inside the shop. He insisted I come into the bathroom to wait, and I assumed there was some sort of separation between the shower. Except, there wasn't even a shower in the bathroom, and he started washing himself in the sink in front of me before I could even process what was happening. Story 21. I have 2. First from Craigslist casual encounters. I was very young. It was I who posted, feeling horny and destructive. I said I was looking for stamina, 420 and a nice package. He picked me up and he was ginormous, like 400 lobbies-ish. We picked up some food, smoke at his place, and then it was on. It was wild in several rounds. Very talented fellow. He kept sweating profusely, burning my eyes. Eventually we kiss and cuddle and go to sleep. I hear a noise and look at this guy, and he is fucking dead. Not breathing, no chest movement. I panicked and was like, oh. Because no. After what seems like forever, he kind of snores back to life. I wake him up yelling. He had sleep apnea. Swears he'll get a CPAP. Second from POF. He was in law enforcement in a very remote location. He was physically a specimen, like an actual Ken doll but bald and Asian. He had to helicopter in to drop off a detainee and had several hours to head back. I agreed to let him pick me up, but on the way I was like, dude, where are you taking me? Well, his parents still lived in our city and he took me to his childhood room. All his grad pics, academy stuff, and family photos still up. His dog watched, but the guy said the dog liked it. He slept like a corpse, flat on his back and unmoving. The next day he showed me a pic of a crime scene on his phone. I called him sick, he agreed, and said work was desensitizing him. Both weird but skilled. Story 22. Maybe he has an STI and doesn't know how to communicate about it, so he just builds to that point and goes about finishing that way without having to explain. Story 23. Wildest story maybe deserves a Tifu of its own was I asked a local vape shop manager out. Like managed multiple shops. She was also taller. Okay, because I'm 6'4". But great figure, pretty face, and absolutely amazing smile. Interestingly enough, she was in some of the store's TV and radio commercials. She was attractive both physically and emotionally, mentally. I came in multiple times during COVID and finally asked her out after like a year. but it was like a low-pressure walk, which she declined. But let me tell you, the speed she wrote her sophomorus down on the paper made me smile. She said she wanted to grab dinner. We texted a bit, then scheduled dinner. She was an amazing date, intelligent, a must for me, and great convo. We went out a few times and kissed at the end of them. She even paid once. Then she recommended charcuterie and chill basically at my place one night. Even watch. Amazing night. The is while cuddling and watching the movie. I'd had insomnia the last few nights, and when we started cuddling and wrapped up comfortable together and my head hit the pillow, I think we kissed a few times, but I didn't want to come off as a horn dog and go too far too soon. But like a few mins after my head hitting that pillow, being relaxed, I fell asleep. I woke up and just thought, fuck, I messed up. I took her out to eat for breakfast and convo clicked, and we went on our ways, spoke about a week longer, and she ghosted me LOL. Last message I sent, it was like 3 back-to-back total, was basically, I hope you find happiness in the universe, or some cringy. But I did truly believe it. She deserves a great guy. Hope she finds him. She also doesn't know what she missed out on, is the way I chose to think of it as going forward. From a purely physical standpoint, ego, for those curious, I've posted on my profile both pics and videos, and have been asked if I have an OF as well as PMs from Redditors. Story 24. It was before Tinder, but I met a friend of a friend at a bar one night in college. We'll call him Chad. I was drunk at the end of the night, and Chad said I could stay at his place that night. I agreed. Only problem was that he lived 2 hours away. He was a gentleman that evening and didn't take advantage of drunk me. In the morning, we did do the deed. Unbeknownst to me, I had started my period during the night. I left him with sheets. He drove me 2 hours back to my dorm. We never talked again. Story 25. That's so bizarre. Maybe he was married in the closet and he thought this was the closest he could toe the line without actually doing anything. I wish I had a weird story to share, but most of mine are pretty boring, aha. Story 26. Weird. Did he at least use a tissue or something? Then again, that might imply he had pre-prepared for exactly this, which makes it weirder. Still, you can't just turn up and on someone's floor. Surely. Story 27. Walked with her for a couple of hours, went to McDonald's. After finishing it just right at the exit, I was like, 1 minute please, I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, me too. 1 minute later, I was waiting outside. 10 minutes later, still standing alone, I was getting sus. I texted her, no response. Waited for another 30 minutes chilling and chatting with friends before finally going home. Texted her again with, why did you do this? You could just tell me you were going home. I was waiting for you outside for all this time. A couple of hours later, she responded with, just simple. Actually, I was happy with that ending. She weighed 20 kilos or more than in the photos, so I wasn't planning a second date anyway. Story 28. Oh man, I went on a date with some hella nerdy white kid. We agreed on a Mexican spot and ate, and went to this dog park. He just kept going on about coding and programs, and when we leave, he mentioned out of nowhere politics. This was when Trump barely got into office. And I mentioned his thoughts, and he got all quiet and said his family and him don't talk about politics or something like that. And then he turned and asked what I was and just answered Mexican, and he stopped walking, and I was like, bruh, but when he dropped me off at the bus stop, tried to kiss me, and missed. Never answered back lol. Story 29. I have a story from when I was 17. I'm 31 now, and this still makes me cringe hard. I had been talking to a guy online. I'd never met him, but he'd moved in vaguely the same circles, and I'd heard he was fine. I've always been alternative, and back when I was younger, I was super into boys with emo fringes. This guy had all the classic hot emo boy MySpace pose photos, so naturally, I was interested. He lived about 6-7 miles away, so we arranged to meet up at the cinema and watch a film. I arrived at the cinema to find that this guy was not what I expected. The emo fringe was hiding a lot. Turns out he had no money and wanted me to pay for him. I refused, and he suggested we go back to his house and watch a film. I have no idea why, but I agreed. On the way, he stole a flashing traffic cone as a gift for me. I had not expressed any interest in this. We get to his house, and his whole family is waiting in the living room, parents and about 5 siblings. A dog ran over and immediately started my leg. No one intervened. His mom was in a wheelchair with an oxygen mask that one of the kids was trying to wrestle off her face to, I guess. Where? Then the dad says to the guy, you want to keep this one if she's... Me and your mom had some great threesomes. Brilliant. We went upstairs to watch a very badly made copy of Drag Me to Hell. We perched on the edge of the bottom bunk of a bunk bed. His little sister kept storming in to ask whether I was his girlfriend and were we going to be kissing yet. I slid away to the bathroom to text my parents about 15 minutes in so they could come and get me. I made excuses about needing to leave and he started crying and then offered me the DVD to take home and finish. I never spoke to him again. Story 30. So I was 16 at the time. I was in a grocery store when this really attractive guy came up and started talking to me. We exchanged numbers and texted for a bit. I told him all about my little Pomeranian, and I sent him a few photos. For our first date, he wanted to go to a dog park. I was like, that's kind of cute, and in a public area. I brought my Pomeranian, and we went on our way. When we got there, the guy had already set up a small picnic area, but he didn't have a dog with him. I figured maybe his dog was running around and playing, so I let it be. That's when I should have left. I bring my dog over and we sit, and the guy picks my dog up and puts him in his lap. He said he just wanted to hold him and pet his soft fur. We started to talk, and I noticed out the corner of my eye that he was moving around a bit. In my head, I'm like, well, when Max gets comfy, he makes a circle and lays down, so maybe that's why he's moving. I look over and eyes go wide. I grabbed my dog and started yelling. I called him so many names, and I told him I hope a dog bites it off. I yelled how he could do this to poor animals, and I ran off. I took my dog home and I made sure he was okay. The guy didn't get the chance to do anything more than rub his member on him, but I was still worried that would traumatize Max. He acted normal, but when his doctor appointment came up, I asked if there was a way to check and explained what happened. Good news, nothing was wrong with him, and he was a healthy boy. If I was older and wiser, I wouldn't have put Max in that situation. I never talked to the guy ever again. I just thought the guy was another dog lover. Well, he just took that title too serious. Story 31. Lol, this seems like a frat initiation, or some kind of bet to see who get the most. Was there ever any texting or messages after said incident? I kind of feel like the poor cat was the victim here, sorry had to throw that in. Story 32. Let's do weirdest first. I met a girl on I believe it was FB dating. Younger, but seemed nice enough and we chatted well. We got together to do a movie night. It was still COVID time, but sure was a total wet blanket in real life. Barely talked. We watched the movie, nothing happened, and I took her home. We didn't chat much longer after that. It was too bad, really. We'd gotten along fine through text. Oh well, wildest though. Gee, that kind of depends, I guess. Okay, fastest hookup. One Tinder match during 2021 literally happened around 10 p.m. within minutes of my swiping right. She was super bored and wanting to get out, but had already had a couple of drinks. We sent a few messages back and forth. She was definitely looking to get laid, and honestly, so was I. She was about 40 minutes away, but couldn't host. She sent pictures while I was driving. I picked her up and we drove back to my place. The rest is pretty obvious. Probably the fastest hookup in my life. We got together several times over almost a year. Story 33. I only went on one Tinder date, and it made me realize I should delete the entire app. First, we went for drinks at a place. He was only talking about himself and repeating the same things over and over. But the drinks weren't nice there, so we went to a different place. This is what he said. People have no reason to be fat. They can just go to the gym. If I find out I exchanged numbers with a fat girl, I'll delete it. I'm overweight. Men should always pay for dates. Women can pay them back during marriage. Trans people, according to him, shouldn't exist, and it's just plain wrong. I couldn't disagree more after that. He started bragging about how much money he had. Around that time, we walked into a coworker of mine. My coworker is really kind and chill, but people could think he is gay. Just generally his clothes and the fact that he wears one earring. We chatted for a bit, and my coworker left to go back to his friends. That's when my date told me that should have left us alone, and he doesn't need people like that near him. So I told him I was bi. He wasn't a fan. Still, we took it to the bedroom. First, he wanted to watch a movie. Just a regular movie. Action, not even romantic. He talked during the entire movie, until he decided he was ready. He stripped real fast and just stood there waiting. No romance at all, just wanting to stick it somewhere. I said I was tired and he went home. The next morning, I told him I found him disrespectful and that I wouldn't be in contact with him anymore, and then I blocked him. And story 34. A girl asked me if I wanted to come over and watch a movie. Said and done. It was a bit of a drive, but she was hot. Got there, we matched up nicely, so I decided to stay the night. Around midnight, she got frisky for round 4 or 5, and I tried my hardest to really give it my all so that she would let me sleep. Then I heard the bedroom door close, and since it was just me and her there, I got kind of confused. She just, "Don't worry, it's just my boyfriend coming home from work." Quietest breakfast I've ever eaten. Story 35. I've got 2 wild Tinder stories. 1. Matched with this girl who was into feet. I wanted, so I lied that I'm into it as well. Watched enough feet. How worse could it be? Turns out I wasn't into feet. Very, very bad. I ended throwing up later. 2. This girl was perfect fine. Kinda nerdy, and we had a lot of common interests. Went on 2 dates with her, then we had on the 3rd. She was a freak, like super freaky. First time we did it with her pressed up against my room's giant window. She wanted people to see. A fike, there was no one. Then she made me her, while she sucked off a reading light. You'd ask what that's about? Then she wanted me to on her. IDK, that really turned me off and just felt disgusted at how much she was into it. Story 36. One of my weirdest Tinder meetups has to be this guy I was meeting up with for the 2nd time. First time was good, was just a hookup, one-night stand type of deal, so wasn't much communication after. When we met up the 2nd time, he got a hotel room, and when we got there, he proceeded to drink like 3 cans of the tall, twisted teas. Then tells me how he had been in jail for DUI cause when he starts drinking, he just can't stop. Then he started talking about how he's seen this guy online walking on his hands and really, you wanted to try. Proceeded to try for about 30 minutes and kept falling over and knocking the lamp in the hotel over. Front desk ended up knocking on our door and threatened to kick us out. Overall kind of harmless, I suppose, but just a weird night, lol. Story 37. So this one time I was giving this guy the jaws of life. I'm talking the best throat I've ever gave anyone in my life, and afterwards he wouldn't stop looking at me and was very insecure about how I learned all that. It was very awkward. Story 38. It was 2018 and I just turned 17 back then. I set my age to 24. I matched with this woman, she was 35, but she set her age to 25. She looked pretty cute and young to me. We dated for like 3 months and one day I decided to ask her for. She invited me to her place and while in bed I noticed this photo of her with another man. Then I asked her who this was. With a smile, she says that it was her husband. I did not even finish off, and it was a huge turnoff for me too. I left her house and decided to end things with her. We never contacted ever again. Hope she's doing fine. Story 39. I would actually say that was a challenge from friends. Stupid ideas dudes can come up with. Right now he's posting on I actually did this and sharing with his friends. Not cool for you, but maybe. Story 40. I don't have a really crazy story yet, but I'm working on one. I'm trying to get a 2nd, 3rd date in a concert one nation away. Gonna keep you updated. Story 41 Tinder. Playing Battleship at my kitchen table over small talk and hip-hop. This guy viciously jacking off under the table. It was COVID, so up was down, down was up. Story 42. I was asked out on a date by a doctor I used to work with. I'm a nurse. He was older than I was by quite a bit. That didn't bother me. I like older men usually. He asked to see a picture of my mom, which I thought was weird, but showed him. He said, "That's great, you'll look young for a long time." It all went downhill from there. Clearly he wanted to date me because I looked so young. I ended the date and did not return any of his calls. 6 months later, he married an 18-year-old girl that worked at Chuck E. Cheese. Story 43. I was friends with benefits with this one guy, but I was super into him. I wanted a relationship, but he wasn't ready. So we just did FWB. We never had though. It was always oral, but he barely ever did anything to me. And then finally he agreed to have, he was still a virgin. I got on top of him, but his kept going soft when I tried to put it in. We just didn't have, and he ghosted me for a while, only to come back later wanting me when I got into a relationship. Story 44. Not a Tinder date, but a first-time date. I've been chatting up this guy for almost 2 months before we actually went on a date. I made the decision to go to his area so we can grab a bite to eat, 40+ mins away from me. He begins drinking, and I'm now concerned, lol, we agree to go back to his place. I walk into his room and OMFG, it's like he's a teenager. I was stuck between, I'm fucking horny, and I want to leave. Now. I ignored it. We started going at it, and I kept finding random things on his bed, socks, pens, a receipt, etc. I kept getting distracted and ultimately could not reach the big O, but he kept going. I eventually told him to get off and I'd get on top. Hopefully I can make myself. It worked and he still wanted to keep going. He flipped me over to go doggy style. And I came face to face with a pair of boxers that weren't the ones he just take off. I immediately got up, thanked him, and left. Story 45. Went out with a guy who had just barely injured himself at work like 20 minutes before. Hyperextended his ankle or something. We went bowling and then out to dinner, with his pain getting progressively worse and me constantly asking if he would like to call it a day and talk later, even offering to take him to the ER. He was sweating and looked like he was about to cry through dinner, so I guzzled my water and dumped the ice in a napkin for him to put on his ankle. We finally got back to his car and I was flabbergasted when he went in for a kiss. Like, dude, I'm not feeling very flirty while you're gasping from pain. We never spoke again. I hope his leg healed okay. Story 46. I met a girl who would queef on command in front of me and thought it was funny. She asked me to be her girlfriend after we had a couple hookups. There's so much to this story I want to write a sitcom on it. Story 47. Met a guy on field, had good conversations. He lived nearby so would have been super handy. All seemed good. So I went to his house and we get sat down talking and he brushes my arm and says how soft my skin is. Then he looks me right in the eye, whilst stroking my arm and said, I haven't had in over a year. Not gonna lie, that put me off a bit, so we keep talking. And I need to use the bathroom. It's one of those new build box houses, so the downstairs toilet is basically a cupboard in the living room. I come back out and he says, I could hear you weeing, so thank it was only that. Final straw was when he went on to tell me about a holiday with his ex. He wasn't over her. Where they'd gone on a boat trip, he'd got a bad stomach and had no choice but to go into the sea and fish then swarmed him and began eating his. If it was a friend telling me this story, I'd find it hilarious, but on a first date and with everything else weird he'd said, I just completely lost interest, excused myself, and left. Before I'd arrived home, he'd messaged me saying, sorry for being weird. We did not have a second date,